Hey guys, so I've just managed to get Sophia off to bed, even though I had to lie outside her door for about 45 minutes just to get her to settle. It's been one of those nights. So I've now got her monitor beside me in case she wakes up. I'm not sure if you can see that. Her sleeping. I couldn't survive without this. It's honestly probably the best thing I ever bought was the little video monitor, because you can just watch and see if she's there, because she likes to get out of bed and sometimes come downstairs. So literally earlier I looked at it and was like, she's vanished. But anyway, now that I have 5 minutes free, I thought I would just make a little vlog about that age-old mummy issue, the whole breast v bottle, and I thought I would just sort of wade into the whole debate and let you know my experience of feeding and what I decided to do with Sophia. I did the NCT classes, you know, the antenatal classes just before Sophia was born, and they are quite keen on the whole breast is best message, which I understand because, as we know from the constant media attention about it, there is lots of research that backs up the health benefits of breastfeeding. Anyway, as soon as Sophia was born, I immediately tried to breastfeed, you know, once she was handed to me. I wore one of those, like a dress, like a little dress thing. By dress, I mean like it's a Primark's like little nighty, Primark's Finest, or Primark, I think as it is over here in England. I always say Primark. Little nighty thing. And so it could be pulled down quite easily. So I fed her, or I attempted to feed her straight away. And at the beginning, it did seem to work. But kind of over the next few days, I started having a bit of an issue in that, well, first of all, it wasn't really working that well for me. And second of all, one side wasn't working at all. So she kept feeding from one boob and completely leaving the other. And I was a bit like, well, does that really matter? You know, can I not just feed her off one boob? To which the midwives were like, yeah, that does mean that one boob's going to like be really giant and the other one's just, you know, going to wither away somewhere. And also you kind of need to have both so that one can replenish while you're feeding on the other one. So my whole one boob idea was out the window. So I kind of had to really try and work on getting her to feed on my left hand boob. And it wasn't easy. I find it really, really difficult. I find breastfeeding generally really difficult. I find it really sore. I just didn't feel like I could get it right, and it just wasn't really working. And I was constantly like, am I doing this? Is she getting fed? What's happening? So after leaving the hospital, I kind of went home, and you're left on your own. You're like, what do I do? And I did feel a little overwhelmed with everything, trying to work out what was best and if I was doing the right thing and if she was getting enough milk. She certainly seemed hungry and she seemed to be getting enough, but you just don't know when you worry about these things. So I did go to a couple of like breastfeeding clinics. So I live in Kent, in Maidstone, and they had a few at the birth centre, so I went there, and I also went to one in the Salvation Army in town in Maidstone. And it was a bit weird at first because you kind of walk in and it's just like, hi, nice to meet you, and I'm just getting my boobs out. And at the beginning I did find that like a little bit weird, I guess. You know, I know it is so natural and it's so something that which I think is great that that people are now able to do it anywhere, but that doesn't mean that you can suddenly change after being something that I guess I was probably a little bit prudish about over the years, to suddenly just being like, here you go. But yeah, you kind of just have to do that, because you have all these women coming over and being like, right, so do this with your boob and we'll do this with your nipple, and you're like, okay then, just, you know, go ahead there. After a while you're just like, whatever, they're not mine anyway, they belong to my child, whatever, do what you want. And that did actually really help. Because I sort of learnt other techniques and ways to like help with breastfeeding, and ways to sort of work and try and work around it. And the other nice thing about those sorts of places is that you meet other people who are having issues and having problems, and actually some people who were having it really, really tough. The one thing, I didn't luckily get mastitis, but I know that it does affect quite a few people, and I know it can be really painful and really awful. And to the people that were at those clinics, the breastfeeding clinics, who were going through that and were trying their hardest to work through it, I was like, I have a lot of respect for you. But at the same time, I'm also the sort of person that thinks if something's really killing you and you find it really hard and it's really getting you down, you know, and if you feel like it is too much to bear, I don't think anyone should in any way judge you for thinking, right, I can't do this anymore. But after about 6 weeks of exclusively breastfeeding, even though I was starting to get the hang of it, I'm not gonna lie, I really, really didn't enjoy it. I felt like I was a human cow. I felt like I couldn't go out. She was waking like every 2 hours. I was exhausted. My boobs were constantly sore. I just was really like, I can't do this. And it was really getting me down. I was finding it really, like, you feel really bad. You feel like you're a failure. You feel like, you know, it should be easier. I kept reading all these books saying, oh, it shouldn't hurt. And I was like, this is really hurting. I was kind of at a point where I was going to totally give up. But I then also read about combination feeding. And I know what I don't really understand is why it's not sort of promoted more or chatted about more or talked about more. So I'm just kind of telling you my experience. And for me, combination feeding was the answer and was the best thing for me. It meant that I was still able to breastfeed, but I started to introduce a bottle as well. Because I'd exclusively breastfed for 6 weeks, they do say it's important to kind of establish that original, you know, that make sure that she is used to, you know, your boob and breastfeeding, because otherwise they sometimes prefer the bottle. So I know that that is the warning and maybe the reason why people don't talk a lot about combination feeding, but for me, it really worked. Sophia took to the bottle and she also took to the boob. If anything, at the beginning, she way preferred the breastfeeding because that's obviously what she was used to, but she took a bottle fine, you know, pretty much straight away. She likes her food, so she was just like, whatever way, I'll take it. And what that allowed me to do was, it meant that Andrew, my husband, was able to help with the night feeds, which honestly made such a difference because I was just at the point of complete exhaustion. I was going delirious. I was literally like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't cope. I have no energy. So to have him being able to do a couple of the night feeds, wow, made a huge difference. Also just to be able to give my boobs a rest, you know, the pain I did, as I say, I found it very sore. So it meant that I could take a break. So I wasn't always thinking, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to do this again in another 2 hours. I don't know how I'm gonna cope. I kind of had that sort of backup of, it's okay, because I can give her a bottle. The one thing I must say though I did find is, oh my word, formula is like, you know, a complete minefield, because I'd been taught so much about how breast is best and all about breastfeeding in the antenatal classes. Absolutely nothing about how to sterilize a bottle, how much formula, how to heat it, you know, the best sort of temperature, anything like that. So I was completely like, what do I do with formula? So I found that quite difficult. And if I could give advice to anyone running any sort of antenatal classes, is to also talk about bottles and bottle feeding, just because there are a lot of people that choose to do it and or maybe don't have a choice and have to do it, and there's very little that you're taught before you have a baby about how to bottle feed. Anyway, I then started combination feeding from 6 weeks. I would still probably, majority of it was breastfeeding, and I think about maybe 2 bottles a day of formula. And the rest was breastfeeding. And so over the next sort of 9-10 months, then it kind of slowly moved from, I guess, less breastfeeding to a bit more of the formula. But I breastfed up until she was about 1 year and 2 months old. And I must say, by the end of it, because I was doing a bit of both, as I call it, I started to really enjoy breastfeeding, which I never thought that I would, because I'd hated it so much at the beginning. And by the end of it, I was like, actually, do you know, it was convenient, didn't have to make a bottle or worry about heating it up. It was quick and easy, and also the pain did go away. So anyone out there who's like, I can't do this because the pain doesn't go away, I didn't believe that it ever would either, really didn't, but it did, and I did get to a point where I started to enjoy it. Maybe for me it's because I knew I had that backup of the bottle if my boobs were too sore. I knew that I could just turn and have, use the bottle a few times a day if I needed to, and that really helped me. So yeah, I got to a point then when I really enjoyed breastfeeding. It wasn't something I saw as a chore. And I kind of felt like, well, at least she's getting, in a way, the best of both. So for me, combination feeding is what worked. And I know from other friends of mine, a lot of them find the same. I know of people who have completely exclusively breastfed as well. And I know people who have chosen to formula feed and others who had no other choice. And I just feel like, do what works for you. For me, combination feeding worked for me. It meant that I still felt I was able to give her breast milk, which luckily I was able to do. There are women out there who can't produce milk or can't produce enough and are therefore told that it's maybe a good idea to give the baby formula because the baby needs to put on weight. People kind of don't seem to realise that when they push this whole breastfeeding thing. It's not that every woman out there who doesn't breastfeed chooses that path. Sometimes, in fact a lot of times, it's that they have no other option, and I just think we really need to lay off everyone. As far as I'm concerned, happy mum equals happy baby. Obviously not to an extent where it's like, as a mum I'm out partying all the time, leaving the baby at home, but I mean, if you can have it where as a mum you're doing whatever works for you and makes you happier and works for your family, then what's wrong with that? The other thing I find with breastfeeding is that, as I mentioned a wee bit earlier, I was probably a little bit prudish. I didn't realise that I was, but I guess I am a bit not always having the boobs out. And I find that a bit weird with breastfeeding to suddenly, have them out. When Sophia was about 2 weeks old, I went into town. Bad move. And she was screaming and screaming and screaming. So I tried to breastfeed her in a coffee shop, and I mean, it wasn't anything. The coffee shop were fine with it, but because Sophia wasn't really taking to breastfeeding, and I couldn't get the angle right and her to take, so we just had this milk spurting out everywhere. It was horrendous. I just wanted to die. I was so embarrassed. Also, speaking of horrendous, embarrassing stories about breast milk just floating out of you, heat really makes your boobs leak. Oh my word. I went on holiday to Santorini when she was about 2.5 months old, and it just literally, I was just sitting there, having a sunbathing, and just be leaking all down you. It's lovely. I had a massage. That was very embarrassing because it just was flowing. Luckily it was a female masseur masseuse, what, I'm not sure. And so she was a mum and understood, so she was fine with it and made me feel at ease. But I think if I had a man, he might have been like, seriously, what is going on with you? You're leaking fluid everywhere. It's just another one of the glamorous things about being a mum. So yeah, I was a wee bit sort of prudish, or there's certain things I found a little bit uncomfortable at the beginning about just getting the boobs out everywhere. And so I found different things that helped me. One was a breastfeeding apron, which honestly was amazing. And some sort of different tops that you can get. In fact, what I might do is I might do another vlog at some stage and actually show them, because they're somewhere upstairs, hidden somewhere. I need to dig them out. And I'll maybe sort of go through things that I used when I was breastfeeding that helped me to sort of to breastfeed more, to feel more comfortable with it, because not everyone out there is comfortable with just sort of whopping their boobs out, and but that shouldn't be a reason to stop you if you really want to breastfeed. So yeah, I'll show you some of the things that I used, and the creams and the apron I got and the tops that I got and things like that. I'm trying to think what else I had. I'm sure I'll find other things, but I'll go through that. So I'll do that vlog at another stage. But yeah, so overall, I just want to say that for me, what worked was doing a combination feed, so combination feeding. So I did do a bit of breastfeeding, but I also did a bit of bottle feeding. I see the benefits of both, and I understand completely why people would choose to do both, actually. You know, breastfeeding, yes, there are loads of benefits. It is really convenient. It's really easy. It's free, because formula is not cheap. But formula allowed me to get a bit more sleep, meant that Andrew also was able to get involved with the feeding, which I think is great. I think if dads can do a bit of feeding, why not? You know, it's good for them. It helps build a bond. And by combination feeding, it meant that I sort of continued to breastfeed, which I probably wouldn't have done if I'd felt that the only choice was breastfeeding, and I felt completely like I must. I probably would have given up completely. But because I was able to do a bit of both and a bit of combination feeding, yeah, I ended up really enjoying breastfeeding and doing it for, as I said, about a year and 2 months. Overall, I would say, as a woman, as a mum, do what feels right for you. That's what I did, and I have no regrets. And that worked for me and my family. You do what works for you and your family. And if you have any comments about things that worked for you, or any questions about anything to do with what I've just been blabbering on about, I apologise for blabbering so much. Please leave them in the comment section below. And maybe you have advice for other mums who are sort of deciding whether to breastfeed or bottle feed, or to mums who might be struggling with breastfeeding, any tips that helped you. Yeah, please leave them below. And yeah, I'll be back soon, and I'll hopefully do another vlog in the next while with showing you some of the stuff that I used when I was breastfeeding.